On the way I heard someone calling my name, and was surprised to discover Bernie calling from a stockade-type enclosure. He looked like a bum, unshaven, uncombed, and rumpled. I asked him why the hell he was still there, because we were going into our 3rd week of boot training and he should have been sent home by this time. He said he would have, if he hadn't turned up with a dose of clap, an episode of venereal disease, which resulted in his being quarantined until cured. He told of the complete hell he had experienced since enlisting, and was close to tears in the telling. I tried to boost his morale by giving him what understanding I could, considering I never liked him, plus having my own problems. I felt sympathy doesn't cost anything, so why kick a beaten dog when it's down? I told him to hang in by cleaning up his act, and all of this madness would soon be a bad memory, and reminding him how short his tray in hell really was compared to those of us who chose to remain. When I left Bernie, he was smiling and feeling better, but I was feeling lousy. This mood quickly left when I reported to the mess sergeant. Instead of assigning me to some messy cleaning job as expected, he told me to help myself to a cup of coffee and we would have a talk. The crux of our brief but friendly conversation was he introduced himself as being an old buddy of Pokes, and Poke had asked him to look out for me. When he mentioned one hand washes the other, I knew this little, fat sergeant was talking my language, direct and to the point, so I asked how much soap would be required to keep my hands clean. He replied that $3 a shift, 6 hours, would guarantee their being spotless. $3 was more than his sergeant's pay per diem. I knew he would have gladly settled for $2, so told him we might as well make it $4 to cover a manicure, extras, as well. It was plain to see he was surprised at the added bonus, but casually agreed by saying I had only to ask and I would receive. Until our platoon left for Camp Matthews Rifle Range, where we were to spend about 2 weeks learning to qualify with the M1 rifle, I elected to stay on KP because it allowed me to do whatever I wished. The majority of my time was spent in a routine manner. When the platoon left for the field every morning, I would take a long, private, relaxing shower and prepare myself for the day. Being alone most of my life through fate and choice, I found coping with certain aspects of communal life very difficult. I never appreciated nor could comprehend how anyone could comfortably use mass-exposed toilets and sanitation facilities. As a child, my modesty prevented me from swimming at the YMCA because I refused to go bare-assed. When I was 12, Eddie Ross and his friends used to laugh at my insistence on keeping trunks at the Belcher Athletic Club for swimming. My past observations had me convinced that physical modesty is correlated to pride, and is a rare commodity. Later I would find it to be an almost non-existing trait among females, because of their inherent preference for vanity, which is superficial and less demanding. After showering and dressing, I was too young to shave. I would spend an hour or so in the mess kitchen learning what I could about food preparation. The only thing I learned is why military food areas are referred to as a mess. This experience was another reminder of my stepfather, who considered cooking as one of his many talents. After sampling some of his concoctions, I felt his skills more suited to the hobo jungles from whence they sprang, and was another reason why, from the age of 7, I ate most of my meals out. My little friend, the mess sergeant, not only allowed me to partake of whatever was available, but would look the other way on my carryouts, as well. Knowing pigs get eaten, I kept it within reason to correspond with what I was paying. These carryouts, which consisted of canned fruit, donuts, cookies, or other sweets not usually served to recruits, were highly appreciated by my friends. A few times I left our restricted area and purchased goodies from the base PX. So there would be ice cream and drinks awaiting the chosen few when they came in from the field dragging ass. On these occasions, I don't know which expressions I enjoyed observing the most, those who received, or those who didn't. Someone once wrote that living better than your enemies is the sweetest form of revenge. I have always agreed with the eat your heart out philosophy. Years later, comedian Jackie Gleason would get off every week by indirectly saying, "Hooray for me and fuck you," to tens of millions of his admiring fans, not realizing the true significance of how sweet it is. For this accomplishment alone, he's more than entitled to his self-styled image, the Magnificent One. It was during this KP period I developed a passion for reading and got into it solely to pass away the time, but soon became addicted. I had read Anthony Adverse and a novel about a well-hung red-bearded sea captain sailing the South Pacific in the early 19th century. Although Anthony Adverse was better written and touched on many pertinent points involving human behavior, the experiences related to in the sea captain's book substantiated certain theories I had, pertaining to the unjustness in male and female sexual prowess. Through past physical and verbal encounters, it was apparent to me the average female could accommodate more genitals, in size and numbers, than the average man could conceive or accept as being possible. Not only do they greatly advance man sexually, but their aging processes far advance man as well. Diamonds may be a girl's best friend, but gravity is her worst enemy. From these deductions, I ascertained it would be prudent that I predicate all my future relationships on short durations. Camp Matthews Rifle Range was located in an isolated hilly section outside San Diego. The 2 weeks I spent there, during Christmas and New Year's, were somewhat enjoyable and profitable. The first week we learned the best methods for holding a rifle steady when in various shooting positions, such as prone, sitting, kneeling, and standing. This consisted of properly setting the leather rifle strap tight around the left arm, with the elbow bent to the right under the rifle as much as possible, pulling against the strap to create the steadying effect. I soon found the degree of steadiness was relative to the degree of pain generated in the left shoulder from using this abnormal twisting angle. Prior to these instructions, I thought marksmanship was mainly dependent on good sight and steady nerves, but now realized a little masochism was required. After mastering the rifle holding technique, we were taught how to squeeze the trigger instead of jerking it. This was called snapping in. When the instructors were convinced we could hold and squeeze, we were divided into twos, 2 people grouped together. One man was to simulate recoil for the other by pushing the rifle muzzle up when the trigger was snapped. This trained the shooter to get back on target as soon as possible for another shot. After 2 days of redundant dry runs, I was anxious to start using live ammunition. It wasn't until completing 4 days of this training we were taken to a firing range and allowed to fire small .22 caliber rifles. I thought this a waste of time considering we would never use them in combat and they were totally different from the M1 we would use. Earlier in life I had spent a small fortune in amusement arcade shooting galleries and regarded .22 rifle practice as being neither exciting nor a challenge. My score that day really impressed my Chicago group, and this surprised me because most little kids in slum neighborhoods could shoot the eyes out of a tenement rat using a simple BB gun. This circumstance, coupled with greed and corruption, created an amusing situation. One of our original St. Louis was a fat, 18-year-old kid named Harrison who came from a wealthy Springfield, Missouri family and were, fortunately for him, in the grocery business. I avoided him as much as possible. I considered him an arrogant and obnoxious slob, but I did notice he was a cunning bastard. This latter trait confused me. I had always associated this characteristic as being born and developed out of financial need and necessity. After pondering this theory for some length, I came to realize that even money couldn't satisfy man. Harrison's was for social acceptance, which his weakness for overfeeding his face would never allow. The strangest thing I perceived about such weak and undisciplined people was their common misconception that money can arrest and cure their insecure malady or, at least, compensate for its affliction. Harrison would have been the first to agree with an old quotation I once read: "A man with money is not only young, handsome, charming and witty, but he sings like a nightingale." Years later, after the war, I ran into him and he innocently demonstrated the validity of these sage words. Within a day after our small, boring practice, I became aware of much betting activity going on between my Chicago friends and Harrison. Joe informed me Harrison was taking all the bets he could get, and even money, that a little guy he had been hanging around with named Johnny could beat my final M1 qualifying score. Right away, I smelled a rat. My old friend Eddie Ross had once told me to be extremely careful about betting into a pat hand, and this had all the earmarks of one.
Make sure you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thank you for watching.